Okay, well, hi everyone. Welcome to session 3 of our 2024 Food Trucks Global Online Summit. I'm Eric Wolf, and I serve as the Executive Director of the World Food Travel Association. And I am very excited today to present to you our panel on a Caribbean wellness journey drawing on agricultural heritage. This is a very interesting integration where we talk a lot about culinary tourism or culinary heritage, but we're looking at a sub-segment, which is the wellness sector, and also we're looking at the agricultural sector. And in the case of Antigua and Barbuda, it comes together very beautifully. So Danielle Bird Brown with the Tourism Authority has very graciously brought together some of her stakeholders to talk about this very, very relevant development and how you're approaching cuisine now. So would you guys all like to say hi really quick before we get started with our questions?
Sure. Hi again, Eric. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for your interest in our little corner of the world. My name is Danielle Bird Brown, as Eric said. I'm the Senior Business Development Manager for the Antigua Barbuda Tourism Authority. I deal with partnerships, and I work with several of our marketing pillars, primarily, as of right now, Restaurant Week, but also wellness, yachting and sailing, and heritage and culture.
Anyone else want to say hi?
I'll let the ladies go first, yeah.
Thanks, Jermaine. Hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. My name is Charity Dublin. I'm a public health nutritionist here in Antigua and Barbuda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Winter. I am a yoga instructor and owner of a wellness business here in Antigua. It's a pleasure to be sharing with you all today.
And Jermaine?
And I'll go. Hi, my name is Jermaine Jonas, and I am a plant-based chef with a focus on sustainability. Nice to meet you.
Thank you all. Well, for the benefit of everyone in the audience today, we have put together some questions in advance, and we have an idea of who would be the best to answer each question. We have a number of different questions to address each person's individual specialties. So let's go ahead and start off with the first question, and this is relating to culinary heritage as the foundation of food tourism. So could you share an example of a successful campaign or initiative that uses or used culinary heritage to boost tourism? And Danielle, I think that was for you.
Okay, great. Definitely, I would say, as I mentioned before, our Antigua Barbuda Restaurant Week, we're now going into our second year. We've actually extended it from a week, it's almost 2 weeks at this point. And whereas last year we focused primarily on just prefix menus, this year we have more dedicated events and experiences, which I think is a great boost. And this initiative, it intertwines culinary excellence on island with our tourism promotion. And so it engages both locals and visitors, and it's basically a celebration of our food culture. So in terms of the objective of Restaurant Week and the success that comes with that, the aim is to showcase our diversity, the richness of our local cuisine, and through all the different activities, as I mentioned. It occurs in May, as of right now. The premise behind that was to extend the high season and to encourage visitors to stay longer. Most of the restaurants across the island participate. I think as of right now, we have 65 restaurants registered to participate in Restaurant Week, which is phenomenal. And they all have special menus at fixed prices. They offer traditional and innovative new fusion dishes. And so we get to encourage both locals and visitors to visit these establishments. And the economic impact of that, obviously, is the spend on island. So we also incorporate cooking demonstrations and classes to get to experience making the traditional dishes and to find ways of elevating it or making it healthier, whatever the different technique is for whichever that establishment would be. One of the feature events during Restaurant Week is our food forum. So that one is a panel discussion on the importance of local cuisine, national identity, sustainable food practices, and the potential for our food culinary tourism, and a strategy when it comes to our food promotion. So that would attract food enthusiasts, chefs, local business owners and suppliers, visitors, and get more of an insight into what the culinary culture in Antigua and Barbuda looks like. The direct impact on tourism would be increased visitor engagement. So visiting the different restaurants, participating in the workshops, this kind of broadens the appeal of Antigua and Barbuda as a foodie destination, which is really what the aim is at this point. We have media and blogger coverage internationally, locally, regionally. This amplifies the reach of the event, therefore attracting more and more international visitors and encouraging locals to participate even more actively in the tourism product and the economy. As I mentioned before, it extends the season, which is vital, as you know, in a country that's dependent on tourism. So it kind of smooths out the fluctuations between high and low seasons in the shoulder season. And obviously, we promote our local produce and our seafood with an emphasis on our local ingredients and promoting sustainable food practices, and high levels of support with our local fishermen, farmers, and all of this ripples throughout the local economy, as I'm sure you can imagine. Separate and apart from extending the season and tourism promotion, sustainability and legacy is very important to us at the Tourism Authority and on island. And apart from it providing an immediate boost for tourism through the Restaurant Week promotions and placing Antigua as a culinary hotspot in the Caribbean, it lays the groundwork for culinary-based tourism initiatives going forward. So next year, we will be increasing to an actual full-blown culinary festival. Whether or not it stays in May or we change it to June or July, that's debatable at this point. But in summary, Restaurant Week is a prime example of how we can use culinary heritage when strategically promoted to enhance the tourism product and stimulate our local economy. And it definitely underscores the value of gastronomy as a tool for sustainable development and attracting tourists, not just for the beaches and the weather, but also for our unique food and the dining experiences. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing where we go in the future with this and how these initiatives play a critical role in the sustainable development of our tourism product.
So what would be some of those quintessential Antiguan and Barbudan dishes? And also, does the cuisine differ from the two islands? Because I know that there's a lot of, you've got Martinique and Guadeloupe, you've got Grenada, which is 3 islands, Trinidad and Tobago, 2 islands. There's a lot of these dual tri-island combinations. So is your cuisine different on the 2 islands? And what are the typical dishes?
The typical dishes for Antigua Barbuda is our national dish is pepper pot, which is basically a green superfood kind of stew that's served with or without meat included, and with our fungi, which is like a polenta style cornmeal offering, like a side dish. We also have saltfish, which is salted codfish done with peppers, onions, tomatoes, and Barbuda is predominantly known for its spiny lobster. I'm going to have Jermaine and Stephanie weigh in on what else they would have, because they're more in tune with what the food offerings are as chefs and vegans and so on and so forth. But for me, those are the national dishes that we focus on, but they would be able to add a little more on what else.
Please do. We're all ears.
Sorry, so I would say also, I'm sorry, go ahead, Stephanie. I'll wait.
No, it's fine. Go, Jermaine. Go for it.
Okay, so I would also probably add things that we some items like our dukana and sweet potato dumpling, which is basically some like a boiled dumpling that's made from coconut and sweet potato, which I think is probably one of the main dishes that we can identify as some of our local offerings as well.
Is that what you're calling dukana?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is
It's dukana.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
sounds good.
Yeah, I'd also add that we have a lot of raw food and local ingredients that are key to our cuisine. Soursop, papaya, we have an abundance of papa, as we call it. So there are a lot of natural ingredients as well that go into things, and as well as a variety of local juices, which we definitely enjoy, year round, depending on what's in season. So that's a really great way for visitors to try tropical ingredients, try different varieties of food and drink that they wouldn't have, a chance to try anywhere else.
Okay, thank
And
you.
Charity, as our community nutritionist, she would also know a lot about where we're going with our food offerings.
In
Well, on
addition
that
to the
note,
others,
where are we going, Charity, with those food offerings?
there are some others that can be added, and these are some that have almost become lost even within the local population. For example, we have bambula, which is very unique and creative. It's done using cassava, grated cassava. Then you have a filling made with shredded coconut and spices, and that is placed within it. And then there's another layer of that cassava mixture on top that is roasted. It can be had as a snack, and then persons can go a little bit more and be creative in terms of adding it almost as a cereal to milk or a plant-based milk alternative. So we have lots of these local cultural staples that have become lost over time, and I would love to see that have almost of a resurgence take place.
It's interesting. None of you mentioned any meat dishes except for the spiny lobster, but everything else that you mentioned, I think, was vegan, unless there's a meat or cheese in the sauce.
That's because that's my preference. I guess it colors what I say when I speak. But we do have a wide range of Antiguans like stewed foods. So whether it's stewed beef or stewed chicken, we also have another seafood component, which is conch. I think it's called scungili in other parts of the world. So we do have a wide range of different types of proteins that we include in that stewed component as traditional foods, definitely, yeah.
Okay. Well, this kind of segues into our next question, which has to do with the journey from traditional to modern healthy food. And this was intended for either Jermaine and or Charity. How do you maintain the essence of a traditional dish while making it healthier?
Well, from my experience, what I try to do, because a little background, when I was growing up and I became plant-based at a very early age, what I would do is I would just recreate the dishes that I knew, but I would just kind of ad hoc and add healthier options. So what I would do is I would try to focus on, the whole ingredients whenever possible, and also at the same time trying to retain the authentic flavors of the dish, and also try to reduce unhealthy fats that are in the dish. So for example, if the dish called for butter or lard, I would try to replace that fat with some coconut oil or avocado oil, something that's a little healthier for you. And again, adding also, I really love using citrus and vinegars instead of salt to keep the sodium levels a little lower in the foods, as well as using low glycemic sweeteners instead of refined sweeteners. I'm giving. Sorry.
I'm
Charity,
sorry, go right ahead,
ahead.
Jermaine. So Jermaine gave a
I'm sorry.
fantastic. So Jermaine gave a fantastic answer. However, I would like to counter with the fact that one thing that we do want to acknowledge is that not all dishes need to be what I call healthified. So there are some dishes, especially if we're using these traditional dishes, that are high in these nutrients of concern. If we're using them occasionally, then I would say, you know what, enjoy it for what it is. Now, if we're looking at dishes that we're doing more often, then we definitely need to go with what Jermaine mentioned. What we want to look at is the fact that these dishes have such wonderful, healthy components to them, and we want to focus on that. that. We want to focus on the nutrition sensitive, healthy options that we can add to these dishes, because they do contain quite a wide array of health promoting ingredients. So that is something that we do want to consider. So we want to reduce where necessary. However, we also want to look at what we can add to enhance the dish.
Right. And one more thing that I would add as well is portion control. You know, just control your portion sizes as well.
Portion size and exercise, and I am not following my own advice. Well, so some of the things that you have talked about, I think that someone could be sitting there in Paris or Seattle and say, okay, well, that I get it. I'll just take out all the unhealthy fats and I'll reduce salt and then I'm having Antiguan cuisine, right? But you've mentioned some of the ingredients. You've mentioned coconut a lot. You also mentioned cassava. I know that cassava flour is a thing, and that could be used in some recipes to replace gluten. And also, not all gluten is bad. So I know that a lot of people who are gluten-free can't consume gluten in the United States, but they go to Europe and they can have gluten because it's processed differently. So could you maybe share with us some of those, I don't know, tricks and tips up your sleeve that chefs or cooks know about coming from the islands, of things that maybe people in other countries might not be aware of, that maybe we could expect if we were to visit you in Antigua and Barbuda?
Okay. So I would say, like, as Donna mentioned earlier, we have our dish, which is the pepper pot, which is usually a dish that's made with you know, it usually has some type of salted meat or chicken in there. And for me, for a way to healthify that dish is I really would create that dish, but then I would add maybe an ingredient like wood ear mushrooms. So you're getting the same type of you know, this type of gristly texture that you would get from the meat ingredients, but then it's mushroom, so it's much healthier for you.
Okay, Charity?
Adding to what Jermaine mentioned, we also have a cultural tradition that relies heavily on legumes and nuts, fresh green leafy vegetables, our yellow orange vegetables, as well as more complex carbohydrates. So here we're talking about what we call ground provisions, which would be the cassava, sweet potatoes, edo, yam, dashin. So really ensuring that we're using these as the basis for our cultural cuisine going forward, even when we're making those adjustments, can be quite key.
Are these ingredients that are indigenous, that have been growing in Antigua for a very long period of time? Because I think people can find many of these ingredients in the markets in their own countries, but I'm curious which of these were either on Antigua when settlers were slaves, the history when the immigrants from wherever this source came into the island, or things that were planted after the arrival of immigrants of any sort.
I would say it's a mixture. I would say that it's a mixture of both, and also just that our cuisine is just so unique because it's not only we're also having dishes that we brought from Africa with us, and there's also foods that were introduced to us through slavery and through colonialism as well. So you have a mixture of those two items that now make up our traditional, what we would call our traditional dishes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would add to that just that we also have our pre-colonial history. So let's remember all the way back to, you know, the Amerindians and the first indigenous people of the islands, where, you know, cassava and a lot of those ground provisions that Charity mentioned would have already been in use. And, you know, we have historic texts that show, you know, the various ways that cassava was ground and pounded and made into all these delicious foods that we still see varieties of today. So the history is quite rich.
That's great to hear. Is there any kind of backlash against colonialism in terms of the cuisine, the food and drink? Is there any desire not to eat, say, any kind of British foods because of the history?
From my experience, I would say no. I think we have realized that as a destination, and I'm speaking with a tourism hat, as a destination, we have a very significant expat community resident on island. And therefore, there's actually a restaurant, the name of it slips me right now, but you can actually have high tea on island. Several of the hotels offer that as well. We have things that we have Antiguanized, like the sausage roll, which is a very, very quintessential British snack. And we have turned it into what we want it to be like. And so we have that offering as a sausage roll. But if a Brit comes to Antigua and asks for a sausage roll, they're definitely not going to get what you would buy in Sainsbury's or something. So I wouldn't say that there's been a backlash. I wouldn't use that word. I know that there are people who live their lives a certain way, and really focus on traditional Antigua and Barbuda foods and lifestyle. But I wouldn't say that, from my perspective, that we've had a backlash. I don't know if the other panelists have a thought on that.
Yeah, so I'd like to weigh in a bit on that. So I would agree with Danielle in that there isn't necessarily a backlash against these foods that, came about during colonialism, for example. A lot of the foods involving like pickled meat. So for example, sauce is a kind of soup, I guess you would say, that's made with various parts of the pig. So you have the trotters, you have the nose, the gristle, all essentially the leftovers. And the history behind some of that is those are the parts that the slaves would get. They would get the undesirable bits, and they would have to make do and create something delicious for themselves and their families with these leftover parts. Sauce is still a very revered food in Antiguan culture. It's very common on a Saturday, for example, to find people lining up to make sure they get their sauce, their goat water, their rice pudding, which is the intestine stuff with rice and seasoned and blood as well. So yes, although there is a very painful aspect to some of the history, we have also made it our own. So we understand what it is and we're not shying away from it. It is a part of our culture, for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm. Great answer.
That's great to hear. I don't think that a lot of the former colonies around the world feel the same. I know in Africa, parts of Africa and also parts of Asia, some of their sentiment is a little different. So I think that that's a very reasonable approach. I mean, we can't erase history for whatever reason. Things happen the way they did, and many people are not proud of what happened in history, but we have to move on. We have to learn and not forget, but not get hung up on it either. I mean, there's no time machine, right? So what do? Are we going to sit here and mope around, or are we going to move forward and be happy? And you're a place of sun and sand, and that equates with happiness to me. So anyone else want to weigh in on that? Jermaine, did you have a thought?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think backlash would be a strong word to use, but I think now you're finding more chefs who are trying to embrace more of our own style of cooking instead of, because in the 80s, growing up in Antigua, a lot of the chefs were, you would try to cook like in an Italian style of food or French style of food. And now here you're seeing that more of the chefs are more embracing our own style of food. And I think that's very important because, when you look at other countries like Argentina, for instance, who are very new on the culinary scene, but now their food is being recognized worldwide. And the reason that is because the chefs there have really put their focus onto promoting their own cuisine. And I think that's what we're hoping for in the Caribbean, so that our cuisine can also be recognized one day on the world stage as as a art cuisine almost.
So quickly before we go to the next question, Danielle, what's the difference between an Antiguan sausage roll and a British sausage roll?
Okay, so the British sausage roll is a flaky pastry, and they use sausage meat. Sometimes they add, I think, sage to the seasoning, but it's a softer texture. So in Antigua, they actually use a sausage, as far as I know, and it's regular short crust pastry. So it's a heavier option. And as I said, the difference is that we use sausage as opposed to sausage meat. And therein lies the difference. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, for our next question, this has to do with the business of food tourism, looking at opportunities and challenges. And Charity, how could food tourism contribute to the sustainable development of your local community?
When we look at food tourism, we often look at the way in which it can enhance the visitor experience. So the experience of the tourist, which it 100% does, but it also helps to contribute to that sustainable development. So there are economic benefits, of course, which we would know our revenue is increased. However, there would also be environmental and socio-cultural benefits. So when we look at food tourism, we're also looking at the production, the maintenance of local crops, which we mentioned before. This as well can help to contribute to the biodiversity. We've had some biodiversity loss in Antigua and Barbuda. Our agricultural industry has taken quite a hit. So now we're looking at food tourism. It's almost a way for us to increase our local production of foods. And then we also go into the processing sector. So it really helps to build those connections throughout the food system and the distribution chain. We would have spoken about globalization earlier, right before the session began. So we know with globalization, it's almost become a point where our foods are almost very homogeneous. They're very similar. So I know that some persons may have seen different influencers travel across the Caribbean region, and they're tasting different fried chicken from a specific global entity and trying to figure out which Caribbean island has the best fried chicken. So we have very similar foods, especially due to these fast food franchises. When we are looking at food tourism, it now incentivizes us to market the foods that are special to our destination. It helps us to hold on to those local food traditions, and it helps to encourage that socio-cultural sustainability. Additionally, it's also a means of protecting and maintaining local knowledge as it relates to these food practices and the local dishes, especially we can see that it generates revenue for those who are a little bit more vulnerable in our society. These food production knowledge, it tends to be held by the older women, the elderly, and now we're giving them a place in society where they can teach the younger generation as it relates to producing them for marketing and sale.
So I really liked you touched on the three prongs of sustainability: environmental, sociocultural, and economic or financial. A lot of people are not so aware that there's actually those three different prongs. I think more and more people are becoming aware, but it's always important to reiterate that. And then you were saying that the older people, older women, elderly are teaching some of these how to make some of these dishes or some of the recipes. Is there anything that's being done to codify the knowledge of the culinary resources and assets? So, for example, are cookbooks being written? What's doing to actually document and preserve that culture within the community?
Excellent question. And why I'm so happy for this question is I'm going to share a bit of a story with you. I cannot cook fungi, which is our national dish. Shame, like, let me bow my head.
Charity, go away. You're fired. No, you can't do that.
So yesterday, I decided that I wanted to do fungi with some steamed fish. I looked online, and while I'm not quite sure how to do the fungi, I knew that these recipes just weren't quite right. They were not. And the reason why this is so ironic is because my mother's favorite local dish is fungi. She cooks it maybe once a week. So growing up, I would have been exposed to that. But I think traditionally, older generations almost assume that the younger ones will learn by osmosis. You know, you've seen me do it 100 times, you should know how to do it. We don't necessarily have that culture where we write the recipes down, where we patiently bring the younger persons in and tell them, you know, this is how we do it, this is why we're doing it. So I think that is something for us to consider as it relates to really protecting our food traditions.
That's so interesting that Charity said that, because growing up, my mom was always in the kitchen. However, my mother's not Antiguan, she's St. Lucian. And so I learned how to make fungi the St. Lucian way. And it's not called fungi. They do it as a pemi and it's sweet. It's the same type of process, but it's slightly different. And so when my mom moved to Antigua, she started to make fungi, but she still made it with the same texture that you find it in St. Lucia. And so I find it very interesting what Charity was saying, in that the younger generations learn by looking, learn basically by osmosis, because I know every Christmas, myself and my sister say to my mom, you know, we really you need to tell us how much of this did you put in and how much of that did you put in? And she's like, I can't get into that right now. You just have to look and see. There's actually no rhyme or reason or measurement. It's just, you're just cooking with love and feeling, and where drop it top, as we say in Antigua. And so I have learned how to make even saltfish. I tend to make it the St. Lucian way because that's how I grew up making it. That's not to say that I don't know how to do it the Antiguan way as well. But as Charity said, it just makes it really interesting how the young people learn how to do these foods, and so then how the tradition morphs into different globalization elements. So yeah, that's my little story.
Jermaine, did you want to add to that?
Well, I can say, you know, I've always been in the kitchen. I've been in the kitchen, I think, since I was about 4 or 5 years old, always trailing my mother and my aunt. And I am now taking credit for some of my mother's traditional recipes, like her sorrel drink, for example, which is I guess you would say maybe it's called Rosella or Jamaica in other parts of the world. But my mom had this special way of making this sorrel, and you know, I've traveled across the globe and have been making the same drink for people, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is the best thing in the world." And I'm like, yeah, well, it's, you know, it's my mom's recipe. And it just goes to say that although we don't have any, you know, there's no formal, you know, writing of recipes. Once, if you stay connected to your mother and your grandmother, you're going to be able to recreate some of these recipes on your own.
So Jermaine, are you and
So-
Charity going to get together and have fungi lessons when you get back to Antigua?
Yeah, of course.
I think we should.
Of course.
I think you should too.
Of course.
Stephanie, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think the team did a pretty good
and
job there.
Jermaine?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one then. Right. So in the same category, what strategies have proven effective in drawing tourists to off the beaten path culinary experiences? And Stephanie, this is a question for you.
Yes. So we found a combination of strategies useful for drawing visitors to off the beaten path experiences. As we kind of touched on earlier, tourism and globalization have made, you know, a lot of the experiences quite similar. And what we are moving more towards in Antigua and Barbuda is showing how our unique tapestry, our unique topography, our unique cuisine make us a different choice, a more interesting choice as a tourist destination. So one of the strategies that we can look at is promoting our local gastronomy as cultural heritage. So what I mean by that is we emphasize the uniqueness of our local cuisine as an integral part of our cultural identity. So as we touched on earlier, looking back at, you know, ingredients like cassava, which we can trace back to the Amerindians. You know, I mentioned things like the salt and rice pudding earlier on that we can trace to, you know, our colonial history. And then showing how our traditional cooking methods, such as the jabba pot or clay pot, add a very distinct flavor and process to the way that we create our cuisine. The second strategy is to leverage technology for storytelling. So I am very big on using tech and storytelling to help share the uniqueness of our islands. So we can craft really compelling narratives around our food culture by highlighting the origin of the food, the evolution, as we've mentioned, moving towards, healthier alternatives, as Jermaine mentioned earlier. Maybe we do less lard, we focus more on coconut oil, avocado oil, but again, still keeping the ingredients very true to our region and our history. So this approach helps us to foster connections with local chefs and food producers, and again, ties back to showcasing Antigua and Barbuda as a unique gastronomic hub. Of course, visually engaging storytelling is so important. I mean, Danielle, I'm sure could talk for days on end about how important that is to the tourism product. But I've really found that things like, testimonials and storytelling resonate very, very well with tourists who are seeking more authentic experiences. So those who want a little bit more than just a luxury vacation, they want to actually feel like they've had a chance to know the people, to taste the foods, immerse themselves in the culture. Social media and technology have done wonders for us in that regard. All right, the third strategy that I will touch on is fostering public-private partnerships. So collaboration with local businesses. Danielle mentioned Restaurant Week, for example. Tour operators and the hotels means that we can then provide a very cohesive experience for tourists and maximize the economic benefits within our community. So as Charity mentioned, our sustainability approach is not just about, the land and the food, but also how can we make our tourism product sustainable economically and find ways to reinvest that money within our local communities. So we found overall by, using a combination of these three strategies, we can create a really rich and authentic culinary tourism sector that benefits locals and tourists tremendously.
Okay, can we dig a little deeper on that? You were talking about the use of technology, and I mean, I could throw a number of guesses out there, but what are your favorite technology tools and channels that you're using to tell these stories and narratives?
So Instagram and TikTok, let me tell you, the power of these two apps is incredible. It's surprising, the amount of times you might meet a tourist or a guest and they say, oh, I decided to come to Antigua because I saw this reel that so-and-so posted, or I decided to come to Bush Bungalow pop-up for, some local food because I saw this really great Instagram story and somebody said how delicious the food was. And it was so interesting to me, the way the food was prepared. So those two platforms in particular are very critical. I'm sure Danielle can speak a little bit more at length about some of the other tools that tourism is using in that regard.
Like Stephanie said, TikTok and Instagram has been phenomenal for us in the tourism marketing space. We have a very, very dynamic social media and digital marketing team housed in our ABTA office, both on island and also in overseas offices. And the majority, and this is how we actually got through COVID. A lot of people were very curious as to how we managed to maintain, one, our jobs, two, how we still managed to have some significant numbers once we reopened. And it all comes back to digital marketing and social media and the types of posts that you upload and the engagement. So we are very, very, we have a very substantive social media content marketing strategy. And I don't see us leveling down from that anytime soon. As a matter of fact, we're trying to drill down even more into that space and to find a way to keep using it, twinned and to intertwine it with our culinary heritage and our culture, and to make that the showcase of the destination. So they are very, very important elements.
So I'd like to drill down on this TikTok issue a little bit more, because we talked in an earlier session about tools that people were using. And you've said before that you're focused on the luxury market, but TikTok is a tool used primarily by Generation Z or Z, so younger people, or maybe they're slightly older than Generation Z, but still younger people. And if you also look at household spending and the amount of available income that people have to spend, it's not young people. They're not the ones that can afford to come to a Caribbean
Right.
holiday, let alone a luxury holiday. So why is TikTok appealing to you, and do you have any tangible evidence about the actual, how it is actually driving tourism? Is it driving tourism, and if so, how?
TikTok is not driving our tourism product. We focus primarily on Instagram and Facebook. We also, I can speak for the US market, we have a database with 60-something thousand travel advisors, and all with varying with a varying focus, whether it's wellness, luxury travel, retreats, traveling in the culinary space. And depending on which group it is that we're actually targeting for a particular campaign or initiative, then we zero in on that group and create certain campaign assets, communications, in-person meetings, and that is how we drive our tourism product. Our sales team are very dynamic. We have road shows. Other than attending trade shows, we have online, using digital media again, online webinars, panel discussions such as this one with specific travel advisors, tour operators, and we promote our product that way. And we have separated our marketing into different marketing pillars. So it's heritage, we lead with heritage and culture. That has to be infused into everything that we do. We have wellness, we have yachting and sailing, and the romance pillar. So, and within those pillars, you have Restaurant Week and Art Week. So we basically target certain groups, certain travel advisors, certain hotel properties to partner with different stakeholders that would be able to, and we use the media for that as well, depending on whether it's like a Condé Nast or Rob Report, and depending on the level of promotion that we're looking at. So if we're marketing, say the boat show, the charter yacht show in December, obviously that is going to be marketed a different way than to say a group that's only interested in coming to Antigua for Carnival weekend. And that's a whole different promotion as compared to how we market to the diaspora. But we do use different elements of digital media depending on who it is that we're targeting in that moment in time.
Yeah, so I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on what Danielle mentioned about our market segmentation. So you're absolutely right. For the luxury tourists, they're not looking to TikTok for the ideas for destinations that they want to travel to. Antigua is historically a luxury destination. We're known for our exclusivity and a very high-end tourism product. We are seeing the shift that we are having, more tourists who are coming, as you said, with a more medium income range. And for those types of visitors, I've found that TikTok and Instagram have been useful in that we can highlight things like our Airbnbs and more of like the hidden secret kind of locations that make it a little bit more of an authentic local experience. So in my experience with What at Liberty, I've found that persons who are looking to connect more with locals, who are looking for a little bit more of an authentic experience, something a bit more rustic, TikTok and Instagram have proven quite useful in exposing them to a lot more of the local tour operators and, live like a local type experiences. So that's where I think those platforms do come in handy in, again, as Danielle mentioned, knowing our audience and knowing how to reach them through the various tools that our tourism department has at their disposal.
And one quick add-on to that, I saw there was a question from Erin who was asking about if we're using any sort of digital analytics to measure impact of the campaigns. Yes. So we're currently running campaigns all the time with, we have Expedia, we have TripAdvisor, and there are others that we run campaigns with depending on which market that we're in. And we have a team that's in place. Once the reports come in from those campaigns from, say, Expedia or TripAdvisor, et cetera, they're then analyzed and then a comprehensive report is then submitted. So we do tend to know what if we are heading in the right direction and if we need to pivot a little bit or a lot. We are very much guided by the analytics of the data.
So I think the message here, and then we'll get back to the culinary heritage questions in a moment. I think the real message here is that you are highly, highly segmenting your communications and your campaigns. So looking at people's interests as well as demographics and age groups. So you would use TikTok if you want to reach someone from a different audience, but you wouldn't use it for, say, the people who are coming for the yachting activities.
Mhm.
So really, really knowing who your travelers are and communicating them in the channels where they expect to be heard from. And I think this is, well, I think any good digital marketer will tell you, of course, that's what you need to do. But some destinations seem to kind of cast the net wide. And oh, we market on Facebook. Okay, well, Facebook's a really big tool. So how do you leverage that and be precise? Let's go ahead and get back to the culinary heritage questions. So the next question is for Jermaine or Stephanie. What initiatives or programs have been effective in protecting endangered culinary practices?
Okay, sure.
Well,
Oh, Jermaine, you want to dive in first? Go ahead.
sure. So firstly, I would say that preserving endangered cultural practices is a crucial aspect for safeguarding cultural heritage and diversity. Locally, I would say it is definitely our promotion of culinary tourism, which promotes traditional cuisines and culinary practices by encouraging visitors to experience local food cultures. Secondly, I would say we can talk about our community initiatives like our farmers markets and our local food fairs, because they provide a platform to showcase our cultural heritage. And internationally, you have organizations such as your own, Eric, as well as the slow food movement, which helps to promote local and traditional food culture and raising awareness about the importance of preserving traditional ways.
Yeah, I would also build on what Jermaine mentioned in regards to our community programs. So in order for us to revive these practices, we need to protect that information. So as Charity mentioned earlier, like not knowing how to make fungi, for example, which is our national dish. And that's a very common thing. And so finding ways to create experiences for locals that shine a new light on some of the traditional methods and make them excited again. Because sometimes, we take for granted what we have. We don't necessarily appreciate the richness and the depth of our own cuisine. So sometimes it's really important for us to find new ways to shed light on these traditional practices and, inject some enthusiasm within our community. Because when we as locals are excited about our offerings, our culture, it then makes it so much more infectious for people who visit to want to try, what we have. So Jermaine has an initiative called Grown Here, Not Flown Here, and that provides an elevated culinary experience that is built on traditional ideology. So again, bringing that 5-star restaurant mentality to our indigenous ingredients and technology and how we prepare the food, and finding really creative ways for locals and tourists to engage with our culinary products.
Fantastic answers. Thank you. Thank you very much. How can we engage younger generations in the preservation of traditional foods? Charity?
This is coming back to what we spoke about earlier and what Stephanie touched on a little bit. Teach them, teach them, teach them, teach them. We can't get around that. We need to teach them to prepare these dishes and not just assume that they're going to learn the techniques by simply standing around or being in the home or observation. We need to ensure that as persons who are versed in the craft, so while I may be able to make other dishes such as dukana, and not fungi, we want to ensure that those of us who are versed in the craft, we are taking the time to set aside time to patiently go through the hows and the whys of why we are making the dishes in a certain way. And the thing with a lot of these dishes is they tend to be very time and labor intensive, which is why I want to focus so much on putting aside the time to be very patient in how we are teaching the younger generation. Additionally, Stephanie would have mentioned public and private partnerships. So I would challenge organizations to produce workshops and to produce validated and tested recipes or recipe books that can help to preserve our cultural traditional foods for generations to come. We want to ensure that when we speak about the foods that we are preserving, it is not just the dukana and the saltfish and the fungi and the pepper pot, but there are other dishes such as the bambula and the cha-cha dumpling, which I would have mentioned before. Lastly, making it interesting, because as I mentioned before, it's labor intensive, it is time intensive, it can feel overwhelming at times. Social media, once again, the reels, short, quick, easy recipe attached, YouTube videos, Instagram, these are all fantastic ways that we can keep young people engaged. So teach them producing validated and tested recipes, because oftentimes young people who may be going online to try to figure out how exactly they can do they can prepare these dishes on their own, they're met with incorrect recipes that are not true to our cultural identity, and making it interesting 100% would be needed.
Would anyone else like to add on to that?
Yeah, so very quickly, what I would say also, just to follow up on what everyone was speaking about, is the idea of taking these, these ingredients that we're all familiar with, but presenting them in new and exciting ways for the younger generation. So we're still using our cassavas, and we're still using our sweet potatoes, and we're still using our edo, which is taro, but we're preparing these dishes in ways that maybe traditionally they might not have been used before, and I think that's a big draw for the younger generation as well.
We need to keep
And
in
if I may
mind.
once again add,
Oh, sure, please go ahead.
because a lot of our dishes tend to be very high in what we call the nutrients of concern, very high in added and free sugars, very high in sodium, saturated fats, trans fats. We want to look at, yes, preserving these delicious, yummy cultural staples, but a shift in how we can preserve them, yes, but also preserve our health and the health of our young people by making these switches that are still true and still sensitive to our cultural norms.
Yeah, I think we need to keep in mind too that it can take at least a generation to affect change. So if kids are brought up today thinking that you should open the package and put it in the microwave, well, it's going to take 20 or 30 years for that behavior to change. So we can't give up now and just assuming after 5 years, not everyone's changed. Okay, well, the program's not working, let's scrap it. No, you have to keep at it. It takes a while for that change to be re-ingrained in people's minds. And I think another important thing to underscore here is that we've talked about community, and obviously this is local residents. So this isn't tourists. So sometimes a tourist office needs to understand that their target market is very much the local residents as well. And a lot of what we've talked about today is involving the local residents, the local community. And maybe this is a question for Danielle. Danielle, well, anyone can answer. To what extent does the Antiguan Tourism Office feel like it is marketing also to local residents for some of the messaging? I mean, is that part of your mandate, or not so much?
Oh, it's 100% part of our mandate. Without the local residents sharing their practice, their best practices, their traditions, keeping our food alive, us in marketing overseas wouldn't have anything to talk about other than the beaches. So it is very, very important, and we do have team members who are 100% focused on that. We have an Eat Like a Local program that we have put in place, and this focuses on the mom and pop shops, side of the road vendors, just the smaller vendors and suppliers who focus on local foods. And like Stephanie mentioned, some of them you can only find on a Saturday, but the menu that they have to offer on a Saturday is 100% local food. And so us in market who are promoting the destination, we can now speak about this Eat Like a Local program because it's now packaged. So anybody that's visiting Antigua or even resident Antiguans, people living on island, know that this program is in place. We actually have a food tour that visits some of these places, and you can actually join the tour and do that. And that's not only for visitors, locals can attend as well. So it is very, very important for us to keep that aspect of our promotions alive.
So it's not just a tourism office, it's a quality of life office as well.
It's definitely
Yeah.
a quality of life office, the
Yeah,
whole experience.
For sure. So I'm a big
Yeah.
proponent of enjoying our island the way tourists do. I always tell people I encourage you to do the tours, stay at the hotels if you can. And, Restaurant Week is an example of a really great initiative that's not just for tourists. I know so many locals look forward to Restaurant Week because here's an opportunity for them to try restaurants and menus that they probably ordinarily wouldn't go and have a try. And, it's exciting to have that enthusiasm within the local community. A number of the hotels also offer, local rates and packages. So we are able to experience Antigua like a tourist. So we are very fortunate in that regard, in that there are a lot of things available to us. Sailing Week is going on right now. And, I've been to a few of the events, and it's something that as a local, I definitely look forward to. So yes, there's a big pull for visitors to come, but it's also a time where locals and tourists get together and really experience the beauty that is Antigua.
Like Stephanie said, I mean, locals are basically our in-house ambassadors. They are cultural ambassadors. When visitors get on island, they're not speaking to the tourism office. They're speaking to a local on the street, in a restaurant, at a church, on a beach. And depending on the outlook of that particular person that is what is going to be shared with the visitor, who will then go back to where they live and share that information and experience. So it is extremely important for us to have a great relationship with the marketing of our product on island and our destination, and sharing what a fabulous experience it is to actually be in Antigua and Barbuda. We do have, so take something like the Roti Masterclass, which we're going to be offering during Restaurant Week. And people may say, but roti isn't Antiguan. However, roti is a Caribbean food, and depending on which island you visit, the flavor profile is different. So whether you're in Guyana and they add castorep or whatever their particular spices to their curry, their pepper pots, etc. You're in Trinidad and you have another component of that. You're in Jamaica, they may add clove or allspice or something. Every island is different. So the local experience is very, very important when they're speaking to visitors to promote what it is that we have there, and that is what is going to be shared out into the global sphere.
I'm glad you brought up the idea of locals as ambassadors, because that's one of the things that we talk about a lot. It's a free and highly effective way to do your tourism marketing for you, is to educate the locals so when they travel outside, which then leads us to our next question about the diaspora. So in what ways does the diaspora, the Antiguan diaspora, contribute to the global spread and evolution of your culinary heritage?
So like you mentioned before, they're cultural ambassadors. The diaspora are cultural ambassadors, make no mistake about it. I mean, wherever we go and we use certain ingredients, like Charity mentioned, the dasheen, whether it's breadfruit or the different yams and types of things that we use, we find a way to find that within the diaspora. And when Antiguans and Barbudans travel abroad, they establish their homes and their communities, but they continue to prepare and share these traditional dishes. And it leads to curiosity and appreciation from their friends and their new audiences who are exposed to them, whether in the workplace or in the neighborhood. And this is a way of serving to preserve the culinary traditions and introducing these flavors to a global audience. They, I mean, things like pepper pot and fungi and dukana and so on, saltfish. It's not just about maintaining them, but it's about celebrating them. And I find that when you step outside of Antigua as a diaspora, you become even more aware of how special and unique our dishes are, and you want to celebrate them and share them with your friends and other family, extended family members who are in the diaspora. And these recipes get passed down through generations, whether with measurements or without. And that is a way of ensuring that the essence of what is Antigua and Barbuda cuisine can live in the global space. In terms of influence on global culinary trends, the use of our spices, the diaspora use it in different restaurants when they create businesses abroad, they innovate and they fuse all the traditional recipes with the local flavors. And this is what is offered and available to anyone who wants to experience it. And so that's one way of having our cuisine evolve in unique ways, but still preserving what the traditions are. And those same cultural ambassadors, the diaspora, they play a crucial role in the economic aspect of our culinary heritage. I mean, when you establish these restaurants and food businesses overseas, I know like here in South Florida, I know if I feel like having something that's remotely Antiguan, I go to Bruno's or one of these other Fancy Loaf or one of them, and I know exactly what flavor profile I'm going to get and whether it's our traditional bun and cheese, et cetera, et cetera. And so these ingredients have to be found within the market. And sometimes it can only be brought up from Antigua. And so that's one way of the on-islanders benefiting economically from the diaspora over here in market. And the boost for the tourism is as people seek more and more authentic experiences and they taste these foods in market, they actually want to go to the source. That's one way of getting them to actually visit on island and experience it. And obviously our relationship with media and different culinary publications. I know a Restaurant Week has been featured in Caribbean Journal. There's a feature in Condé Nast. We have different influential voices in food media, writing cookbooks, hosting cooking shows, managing food blogs. They all highlight Antiguan Barbudan cuisine. And this media presence really helps to educate and excite people globally about the region's food culture and Antigua and Barbuda in particular. And it contributes to significantly spreading the word and the experiences that are available and also the evolution of our traditional foods. So basically we had this conversation in the past, Eric, about a culinary strategy and an actual culinary brand for the destination. And so while we inspire people and food enthusiasts to visit the region when they're seeking authentic tastes and experiences, this type of tourism promotes cultural exchange and it significantly impacts local economies. I can't stop saying that enough. It encourages the preservation of the culinary practices and traditions. And these are valuable cultural assets that, as Charity mentioned before, there are certain things that have disappeared that we need to remind people of and to bring them back. And this type of networking and the cultural exchange and adaptations of Antiguan dishes within the diaspora, very, very important. So in summary, the diaspora's role in spreading and evolving the culinary heritage of Antigua and Barbuda is very, very profound and impactful because it ensures the preservation of the heritage, but it also celebrates its ongoing evolution and making it a living, breathing part of the global culinary landscape. And from where I'm sitting as a tourism authority, I'm extremely proud and excited to put this unique product that we have out there for others to share, and then to have them book a flight and say, I'm going to Antigua so I can actually taste this at the source on island with locals. So it's a pretty exciting time to be in as we start promoting our culinary aspect And I'm very excited to have, you know, like Jermaine, Charity, Stephanie all along on the ride. And I think it's going to be a really, really great addition to our tourism product.
Great information. Who'd like to add to that?
No, I think Danielle did a perfect job summing it up.
Yeah.
I don't have anything new to add.
No, that was fantastic, Danielle. Thank you very much. I wrote in the chat there, fly, try, and buy, or try, buy, and fly. This idea of sampling a product is one of the best ways to get people interested and convince them to come to your destination. I can't tell you how many trade shows I've been to where you try. I think it was, well, I had a memory once of trying violet candies from Madrid at WTM. This was 15 years ago, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. And I wanted to go to Madrid because of the violet candies. I mean, who knew, right? It's just something you don't expect. But I think that, you know, in places where the Antiguans may go, for example, Toronto or London, where you probably have some pretty sizable communities, people would have friends from Antigua, and then the Antigua friend says, "Oh, well, I'm going to cook for you tonight, right? And I'm going to make you fungi, or I'm going to make you dukara. Did I say it right?
Dukana.
Dukana, right?
Dukana.
And I mean, I would love that. Last time I was in London, I had a friend, and she invited me over, and she was from Algeria, and her husband was from Libya or Tunisia, I forget. And they made their food for me, and it was fantastic to experience their culture through their food. And so I think more of these experiences, people also seem to be more interested in different cultures, and everyone's seeing Spanish, French, Italian, Greek. We all know what that means, but what does Antiguan mean, or what does Cambodian mean, or Bhutan, food from Bhutan? What is that? We don't know yet. And culinary travelers or explorers, we always want to try something new and different. And if we can experience that, and if your diaspora and if your ambassadors, your residents can share that information and that enthusiasm in some of those products, that I think will do make a huge contribution to driving additional tourism to the islands.
Great.
Let's go back to a question that we had from a young lady, Nuo Lee. She said she used to be a social media manager from China for several big brands like Marriott and Booking.com. And she said banning TikTok creates a huge negative impact on Chinese travelers who cannot log into Instagram or Facebook. How do you build partnerships with Chinese destinations? Or I guess he means with maybe travel agencies or outbound Chinese traveler sources.
I understand the challenge with that. I was actually in Shanghai working last year for a period of time, and it was extremely frustrating. I did miss the connection. From our standpoint, the Chinese market, we have reached it by actual in-person networking. So we have, like I was in Shanghai last year, we have persons who would visit Beijing, etc., different trade shows, different types of trade shows, and depending on what that particular travel advisor on the Chinese end of things is looking for, whether it's shopping, whether it's food, excursions, different types of things. So we reach them by in person. We also have connections with travel advisors in China, and through their database is how we would disseminate that information. Also in Antigua and Barbuda, we actually have the regional headquarters. The Chinese embassy is the regional headquarters, and they have a very, very a great relationship with our Ministry of Trade and also with tourism. And so on that level, that ministerial level is another way of reaching and disseminating our information. So we do find ways around not having access to TikTok. And depending on what it is that we need for that particular marketing pillar, we have ways of reaching the Chinese market.
We also have Antiguans in China. So, I have friends that studied in China and, migrated. And so that's, like Eric mentioned, one of the ways where the diaspora overseas is influencing the their communities abroad to come and experience, you know, where they're from. So that's another touch point that we have that's not necessarily formal, but still very impactful.
And the Chinese that are actually living on island, own businesses on island, they would speak to their families, their friends, share information. And that's another way of, as Stephanie said, doing it through the diaspora.
Yeah. And we also do have a small Antiguan presence in Southeast Asia as well. I know of fellow Antiguans who are in Malaysia, Thailand, all these different countries as well too.
That's great. So you can get your own food anywhere you travel on the planet.
That's right.
Cool. All right. Are there any other questions from our audience that you'd like to ask to the panelists today? Now would be the time to put those questions into the chat. While people are having a last minute thought here, I'd like to thank all of you, Danielle, Stephanie, Charity, and Jermaine. This has been a very, very interesting and valuable panel. And also, I appreciate your willingness to talk about maybe some of the less pleasant aspects of cuisine and history. We talked about colonialism, we talked about slavery. They're not always easy topics to bring up, and I appreciate your willingness to share your perspective on these issues, because I think it helps us all to learn and evolve as tourism professionals and as individuals. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. It was a great experience.
Well, it looks like there's no other questions. So again, thank you all. Would any of you like to say goodbye or any last minute words before we wrap up this session?
Like I just said, I just want to thank everybody, particularly my fellow panelists. You guys were great. Thank you so much for the support and adding all the different perspectives on a product that we know that we have it, but it's always so good to be able to speak about it outside of Antigua and Barbuda and to share our experiences and our flavors with everybody else. And of course, to invite everyone to visit Antigua and Barbuda, whether it's during Restaurant Week or any other time of the year. Eric knows how to find any one of us, and we would love to have you. So thank you for joining us today. It's very appreciated.
That's an important point. If any of our delegates would like to speak with any of our panelists, let me know, and I will be happy to introduce you.
Yeah. And thank you, Eric, for giving us this forum to express ourselves and to speak about Antigua and Barbuda.
Stephanie, Charity, you both have unmuted. It looks like you wanted to say something.
Oh, no, but thank you very much for having us. And as Danielle said, we invite all of you to come to Antigua and experience some of the amazing things that we've mentioned today. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
I can tell. Well, thank you again. And for our delegates, we will be convening again in just 15 minutes for our next session and the last session of today. So we'll see everybody else in the room in 15 more minutes. And to our friends from Antigua, thank you again so very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.